Hello one and all, welcome to Seen Through Glass. Welcome to the fourth and final part of my Drive the World movie, where I've been looking back at the epic adventure I took on in 2019 to travel around the world trying to discover what car culture is like in different countries. If you missed parts 1, 2 and 3, my girlfriend Vicky and I travelled through Australia, New Zealand, Asia, India, South Africa and Europe. And in this episode, I want to focus on the North American leg of the journey, arguably our biggest driving leg of the entire year. We covered around 13,000 miles, traveling through pretty much every single state in the United States, as well as dipping in and out of Canada. It was epic, it was exhausting, but we enjoyed every single second, and I hope you do too. So sit back, try to relax, and I hope you enjoy the final installment of my Drive the World movie.
Coming in, flex. I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2233, I'm on 10 again.
It's a pretty well-known fact on this channel that I love LA. Like, I'm obsessed with LA. In fact, I think if I was ever to relocate from London to another city, it would be to Los Angeles. So I was super excited to visit as part of Drive the World, and it did not let me down. In fact, from the moment we landed, things just kind of kicked off. The first thing we did was go and collect the 911 Carrera T, which had quite unbelievably been flown over from London to the west coast of America. Picking it up in this big warehouse, I stumbled upon a whole load of Paganis that had also been flown over to LA from Italy ahead of Monterey Car Week. And before I knew it, I was in the passenger seat of a Huayra Roadster going to get fuel, or gas, as they call it over in the US. It was just like one of those, what is happening moments? But anyway, I feel like a big part of LA is the kind of the famous or the recognizable car collectors that live there. And in the Porsche scene, there's no one really bigger than Magnus Walker. Now this guy is kind of effortlessly cool. Like, he's, almost intimidatingly cool. I'm not cool enough to kind of hang around with people like Magnus, but he very kindly invited me down to his kind of warehouse collection. So this is somewhere he used to live. It's also his office, but it houses his some 30 different Porsches.
So we're talking about cool color combos. Ice green metallic, come and look at this interior. Also factory.
Whoa.
Full black watch tartan on the door panel, front seats, rear seats.
I don't know if people were just braver or more confident or slightly mad because,
Different era in the 70s.
Magnus also gave us a great tip for a local driving road, which I've always wanted to go and drive, but never really had time to do, which is the Angeles Crest Highway. It's about 30 minutes outside of downtown LA, but it's arguably one of the greatest roads in the local area. And so one morning we got up early to go and drive it, and it didn't disappoint, honestly. Like, a lot of American roads are a bit more long and flowing than the sort of European switchback mountain roads, but it was still epic and empty. That was the biggest thing. We hardly saw another car. My favorite part though was at the top, or nearly at the top, there was a diner, and I'm obsessed, I'm in love with pancakes. So the fact I could do an epic drive up a beautiful road and then have pancakes at the end, I was like, this is life. I mean, why do I not live here? This is amazing. The supercar and hypercar madness just continued throughout our time in LA. I just kept bumping into and filming insane cars. And we finished things off in style by attending Sunset GT, one of the biggest supercar, hypercar events that happens throughout the year. We actually went there with Shmoo 150, who was also in America doing his own kind of tour of the US in his Ford GT. At the end of the event, I somehow found myself joining this kind of hypercar convoy. I'm talking about LaFerrari, Bugatti Chiron, Pagani Huayra, Shmee in his Ford GT, just cruising around Beverly Hills. I was like, what is happening? What was hilarious was at one point all the cars pulled over to kind of get some photos, and I was sitting there being like, oh, this is so cool, like what a day, when one of the owners of one of the hypercars comes over and goes, excuse me, do you mind moving your 911 like out of the way because we just want a photo of just the hypercars. And I was like, okay, yeah, no problem. It was a bit of I just got brought back down to earth at that moment. But I got it. I wanted a photo of just the hypercars as well. But anyway, that did bring an end to our time in LA, and it was time to sort of hit the road and head north up the coast for Monterey Car Week. I'm sure some of you know this, but the actual initial concept for Drive the World came to me during Monterey Car Week back in 2017. I was with my friend Phil driving down Pacific Coast Highway in an amazing classic Ferrari. I said to him, wouldn't it be cool one day to kind of travel around the world going to all the best car events? And that was the very initial idea for what became Drive the World. So my entire route, my entire kind of calendar for the year was based around Monterey Car Week. I basically couldn't miss it because it was the birthplace for what I was doing. Now I feel like it's kind of tradition at Car Week for my friend Phil to turn up with a kind of ridiculous car that I end up filming. I already mentioned the classic Ferrari that we drove down Pacific Coast Highway. He also had his Senna one year, and in 2019 he was driving around in a recently commissioned 911 Safari from Tuthill Porsche. Now this thing was epic in any scenario, but Phil said, look, to show you what it can really do, we've got to find a dirt track. So that we did, and I have to say, I'm still recovering from my experience next to Phil in the 911 Safari, absolutely blasting up a relatively non-existent track somewhere in the Monterey area.
We're straight into it. We're straight. I said, don't feel like you have to show off. There's another big tree. You are actually mad. Why do you keep laughing? What a view!
Now, whilst Car Week delivered on its usual insanity of insanely valuable cars just cruising around the streets of Monterey and Carmel, my other highlights from the week actually came from being on track. Firstly, during the Quail Rally, one of the first events that happens during the week, when we're invited to have a go at something called autocross, which is essentially a kind of time trial form of motorsport, but usually by setting up a quite small track with cones at a sort of abandoned car park or airfield. Now, of course, I was there with a 911 Carrera T, but Phil has suddenly decided to swap his 911 Safari for his McLaren Senna. It shows you just how competitive Phil is. So my only goal for the entire afternoon was to upset Phil, to beat him somehow, which realistically I was never going to do because I had a massive power and aero deficiency. But yeah, whilst there was a Cayman GT4 and a Bentley Continental GT, I only had eyes for Phil's Senna and somehow dethroning him from the #1 spot. Didn't quite happen, but amazingly, I ended up second. My first ever time at autocross. I think it was more about how good the 911 is than my driving ability, but the fact we had the roof box on and the rally lights, I was like, that's not too shabby, that. But anyway, Phil was determined to prove why the Senna was so good and why it ended up in that #1 position by later in the week taking me out around Laguna Seca, one of the world's most iconic racetracks. It features that corner, the corkscrew, which seems to kind of descend about 3,000 foot in 50 meters. You just go straight down during a chicane. It's absolutely nuts. And I think I'd only just recovered from my passenger ride in the 911 Safari. To suddenly be strapped in very tightly in the McLaren Senna and going around Laguna Seca, I was like, I'm not sure I'm ready for this. It was absolutely nuts and one of the most sort of like breathtaking in-car experiences I've had around a track. So yeah, I did secretly love every second. Just don't tell Phil that.
Here we go, boys and girls. Corkscrew McLaren Senna.
car week was to continue heading north up the west coast of America towards Canada, doing a drive that I've kind of dreamed of doing pretty much my entire life. And the first stop was San Francisco to catch up with my friends Avi and Gordon. Now, some of you may remember these guys from when I filmed their Maserati Gran Turismo about 4 years ago. The thing had been heavily modified and sounded like an F1 car. Kind of would have loved Vicky to have a go in it because we all know that she loves a Maserati Gran Turismo. But in the meantime, since filming their car and visiting them again in 2019, they'd swapped it for a 458 Speciale. But once again, they hadn't left it standard. No, this thing was running a fully custom, basically straight through IP exhaust, and the sound of it, oh my god. So after a brief outing in the car, we were treated to an amazing dinner, and it was just so good to catch up with those guys, and I've got to get back there to film a proper video on that Speciale. But it was time to keep heading north on arguably one of the most scenic drives of the entire year up that west coast of America. Every corner we went around was just like, wow. In a slightly bizarre move, we've pulled off the 101 highway because I'm about to drive through a tree. Apparently this is a thing here. It's happening. I'm driving through a tree. This is totally bizarre and totally pointless, but brilliant. When you have long drives like this, you really look for any sort of, distraction. And yes, driving through a tree, definitely a distraction. Well worth it. It's so loud. So yes, here we are in Canada. That is Damon, if you don't know, from Daily Driven Exotics, who just power slided his way out of a car parking spot.
Beaver tail,
Yeah.
and we have a poutine.
And then, the poutine just...
So French fries with cheese curds and hot gravy.
We're gonna eat that?
Together, like a bromance.
So you've got to just try and
You're
get
just gonna
all
get a piece
that,
of the cheese curd, a piece of the French fry, and some gravy. If you like gravy, you'll like it.
The beaver tail?
It's delicious.
Is it actually good? It's basically like a flat donut
it's
with
like
a bunch of
It's like
toppings.
a Canadian type of crepe with Nutella
There you go.
and banana.
She's good, right?
She's good.
She should start vlogging.
You said a crepe? Crepe? We call it crepe. I love that.
Oh, creperie.
Crepe.
A crepe.
Crepe.
A French crepe.
He's running. He's running. We're both running. Look at him.
Our only supercar in Victoria.
Yes.
So after we'd caught a ferry to mainland Canada and we were staying in Vancouver, I got the chance to complete a sort of major goal that I'd set myself during Drive the World, which was to drive the holy trinity of hypercars, the Ferrari LaFerrari, the Porsche 918 Spider, and the McLaren P1. Well, if you've seen parts 1 and 3 of my Drive the World movie, you'll know that I drove a 918 Spider in New Zealand and a Ferrari LaFerrari in Spain. Well, unbelievably, whilst in Vancouver, I was visiting the SR Auto Group, which was just full of insane hypercars, including a P1. And when they said, look, what do you want to film today? I was like, maybe the McLaren, and they're like, yeah, no problem at all. So unbelievably, I got to take it for a very quick blast around a kind of industrial estate just outside Vancouver, and my brief time with that car just told me that it's probably the most insane and maybe even unpredictable of the three.
Oh, and those brakes! Those brakes! Whoa. Unbelievable. Those pedals are so reactive, you have to really think about what you're doing, because every input you have feels direct, feels like it's going to transform how the car is behaving. I felt like you had more play in the other two cars. The 918 was so confidence inspiring, I felt like I could push it from minute one. This, I'm nervous. I'm really like genuinely on edge. I mean, fine, I'm not on the best roads to experience it, but it's because I know it could bite my head off. Oh.
Hugely grateful for all three experiences, but of course, that P1 in Vancouver was like, ka-ching, done. I'll be honest, I was kind of caught off guard by the insane amount of crazy cars in Vancouver, because one of the main reasons I wanted to visit Canada was actually to get out and explore the kind of the wild. Like, you hear so much about the scenery and the nature, that part of the world, that's kind of what I wanted to experience. So we set off to kind of explore the area around Banff. So you can only imagine my surprise that whilst we were there, I got a message from somebody called Epic Win F50, who, yes, owns a Ferrari F50, offering to be my tour guide around the region. I was like, I literally came here to look at lakes and mountains, but 100% I would also like to look at an F50. So yes, I explored one of the most picturesque and beautiful areas of the world with a Ferrari F50 tour guide. Ridiculous. Have you ever followed it? Have you ever been outside?
No, I haven't.
I think you need to, because I can imagine what it's like. Well, no, another time, another video.
You always turn me down. Every time it's like, you want to drive the guy around. No, another time. So you're going to come back is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I got to come back. Look at this place. Look at this view. Well, go on, say it. Do your views on...
Views on views. We're just out here chasing views on views.
Every time I've been to America, I've told the Stradman that I was going to go visit him at his home in Utah, so it was so nice to finally get there and catch up with the guy. He's just such a nice guy.
He's so nice.
Such a nice guy, and we hung out with him loads. We had like dinners with him, met all of his friends, met his dog, Oscar.
Oh my god, the fluff ball.
And he actually even took me out to the Bonneville Salt Flats, like iconic land speed record Bonneville Salt Flats. And it's just cool to explore that region, because I think one thing we didn't really know about Salt Lake City, and maybe this was us being a little bit thick, is how high it is, like the altitude that you experience.
You kind of ascend slowly and gradually, and it doesn't look like you're in high peaks, but
it really affected us. And thank God there were some, in the hotel that we were staying at, there were some oxygen cans.
Oh my God, saved my life. Best things in the world. I think
Sam got addicted.
Yeah, to oxygen. It's the thing, people. But on our way out of Salt Lake City, Stradman gave us probably the best tip of anyone for the whole trip, which is to stop by Arches National Park, kind of near Moab. I think Moab quite well known for sort of off-roading and things like that, but Arches National Park, not only was it beautiful, but it felt like another world, right? It was like visiting Mars.
Yeah, arguably the biggest tip of our America trip is, you know, if you ever go there, if there was one place for you to visit, go to the Moab Arches National Park. It just felt very special. There was something really amazing about the sort of red rock stones and just the forms and the shapes that were there. It was incredible.
Now, arguably, two of the biggest and coolest videos that I made during the US leg of Drive the World were filmed in Kansas when I met up with car collector Brian. This guy owns like 70 of the coolest, most varied, but all equally amazing cars you can imagine. One evening, I drove his replica Porsche 917 around the streets of Wichita, and the following day, I met up to take out his 4 GTs on the road. That's a 2019 Ford GT as well as a 1960s replica.
Hey, I got a call. My baby's coming home.
Now, one thing you don't know is that after we'd finished filming the two Ford GTs, I jumped back into the 2019 car to drive back to Brian's home when I noticed that the fuel range was pretty low. So I flagged Brian down and I was like, oh mate, it's saying like 10-mile range. And he was like, oh, you'll be fine, like, let's go. So off we set. This range was just going down like by the second. It was like 10 miles, 9 miles, 8 miles, 7 miles, no matter how smoothly I drove. And I'm freaking out, being like, oh my God, I'm gonna run out of fuel and break down in this guy's car. Like, he's just given me this amazing opportunity, and now I'm gonna break his probably $1 million car. Somehow, it rolled in to the petrol station. Like, it must have been a 15-mile journey, and for the last 3 or 4 miles, I had 0 miles on the range. So yeah, I guess we tested what the fuel reserves are in a new Ford GT, but it was a pretty unbearably nerve-wracking moment.
Of her loving me again. She said she never stopped loving me, and she was coming on the train. I asked her, can you?
Now, I feel like from the minute we landed in America, I was inundated with messages to drive a road called the Tail of the Dragon. We altered our route slightly so that after Atlanta, we could go and give it a go. I was a little bit concerned that maybe this Tail of the Dragon road would just represent a kind of normal European road, and it was just Americans going a bit nuts for what is a corner. But it did turn out to be quite a ridiculous road. I mean, it's like a roller coaster. It's non-stop corners. I mean, just endlessly, and they're all cambered, and you're up and you're down, and it's kind of frantic, and it's a very good way to make yourself feel sick. But I'm so glad I went to do it, because as I say, I got so many messages from people telling me that I had to experience it, and I feel like you kind of have to do it. It's like a rite of passage in America to go and drive the Tail of the Dragon if you are a car fan or a bike fan. I think it's more of a bike road, actually. I don't want to pan that way because this isn't as good as it gets. There's another Regera. Yes, that is an actual FXX.
Oh, it's amazing. Oh, I love it already. It just feels perfect. Oh my God.
Aside from the insane Ferraris I found lurking around Chicago, I feel like we really liked that city in general.
It was super interesting and super different. It was like a mix and match between lots of cities. It had Pret-a-Manger.
Vicky's biggest love about Chicago is the fact it had Pret-a-Manger.
It just felt really familiar, you know, there were lots of familiar brands and it was just like a really vibrant city that we just loved.
And we've been through small town America realistically for a good couple of months there. Suddenly for us we're city people fundamentally, it just felt a bit homely and exciting and really fun. And we also met up with that really nice viewer, Jay, who took us to that amazing restaurant, Sunda? I'm going to go with Sunda.
Something like that.
Yeah, Asian fusion. But that was such a nice evening.
Top spot in Chicago.
Yeah, apparently where all the celebs hang out and stuff.
Yeah, we had a really nice evening, yeah.
We're Chicago fans.
I wake up. I wake up, flex, thumb down that check. No drip, this wet. Tell 'em run it up. No sleep, no rest. Might crash, might wreck. But first I stretch. Tell 'em run it up. I wake up, flex, thumb down that check. No drip, this
A few things to update you on. Firstly, it's got cold. It's got really, really cold. I don't know what happened in the last 24 hours, but the temperature dropped from 20 degrees to 5. So I'm very unprepared because being on the road for a year means that I'm limited in what clothes I bring and I'm just cold. So I'm gonna get that out of the way. Secondly, I went to a barber's here in Detroit yesterday and they tried to kill me. I don't know if you can see that, but for some reason the barber just wanted to slit my throat, so that was an experience. We have been so lucky with weather in America recently. This is the first truly miserable day. Welcome to Montreal, Canada. Maybe it's the fact that we are in Canada still that the weather has got worse because it's October. And I think winter in Canada can be pretty grim at times. I think the whole time in America and in Canada we were terrified of encountering crazy weather. Because you always hear about it, right?
Throughout the whole of Drive the World we were terrified of
point.
crazy weather, to be honest. As you already know, we're not very adventurous.
So we didn't really get caught in a hurricane at any point.
You know, in America you've got a lot more reasons to worry about different climates and different kind of natural disasters.
Yeah, so we were avid viewers of the Weather Channel. That literally became our favourite channel. Whenever we got to hotels, we're like,
and
Weather
scared
Channel.
us even more,
It did scare us a lot, 'cause we were like, there's a hurricane coming through Florida. But realistically, the only kind of really extreme weather that we encountered was when we were in Montreal heading to Ottawa one day. And it felt like we were about to drive into, I don't even know what to call that kind of storm. It was such intense weather. Rain, wind, flooding. Funnily enough, the minute we headed back into the US, even though it was kind of mid-October by then, we got amazingly good weather for our time in New York. I feel like our time in New York was so good because the weather was just amazing.
It was just really nice, autumnal kind of colours, and New York was beautiful, not too hot, not too cold, it was perfect.
That whole time exploring Connecticut and Vermont and New York, it was the ultimate autumn sunny days, and I think we loved it. Fan of helicopters, they terrify me, but I am a fan of this helicopter pilot. This guy's been trailing us now for what feels like about 30 minutes. It's going so extreme because the traffic is so bad. I guess he's having to bring out his best moves to get the shots. So we've had super low flybys. He's been doing what look like J-turns in a helicopter. It's so impressive. Also a little bit sketchy because I sort of feel like I have to kneel down or lean down every time that he comes close. But it's insane to think the amount of money Bentley must be spending on this production. But yeah, this helicopter is so entertaining to watch. Honestly, I don't want to be in it, but being safely on the ground, watching him do his thing, it's mental. final stop of the North American leg of Drive the World then was Miami, Florida, somewhere I've wanted to visit as part of Seen Through Glass for ages, because I've always heard the car scene there is ridiculous, and it did not disappoint. I think one of the very first things I did arriving into Miami was test drive a Bugatti Chiron Sport. I mean, what? That was, yeah, ridiculous. But I got to do so much amazing stuff. Went to check out the Wilson collection, an insane lineup of incredibly rare classic cars. Headed up to Orlando to check out some cool watches, test drove a Ferrari 575, and just enjoyed exploring the city in general. Some of the car dealerships there were nuts, but the food, the scenery, the beaches, of course, Vicky loved the beaches. It kind of felt like a celebratory place to end what had been the kind of biggest and most trying and exhausting driving section of the trip. Whilst Asia had kind of knackered us with all the flying, America and the amount of miles we had to cover in the car on sometimes quite boring highways definitely exhausted us. But some of the memories I have, some of the opportunities I had during that North American leg were just so amazing that whenever we kind of felt down or a little bit stressed or a little bit overwhelmed, I'd then get offered to do something incredible. And honestly, doing this part of the Drive the World movie and remembering things like the 4GT test drives in Kansas and driving that Bugatti Chiron Sport and Car Week and how amazing it was getting into Phil's 911 Safari and all these different elements, it just is, yeah, absolutely an unbelievable time of the year, but also I think our lives. And that kind of brings an end to this series, my Drive the World movie, because whilst I have missed out a few different kind of legs and parts, the UK leg obviously back in July, after America I went off to the UAE, Dubai and Abu Dhabi to kind of finish off some of my travelling, and unfortunately we actually had to skip South America, somewhere we were planning to visit, but because of the way the year just panned out, we kind of ran out of money and time, so we vowed that we would do South America as its own kind of special. So at some point in the future, once all this coronavirus stuff is behind us, we will be heading off to South America for like Drive the World 2.0 / vlog. Well, I haven't come up with a name yet, but you get the idea. So I hope you've enjoyed this series, looking back at sort of some of our favourite moments from the year. It was an insane 12 months, visiting over 35 different countries. I think we stayed in something like 120 different hotel rooms. I drove nearly 100 different cars. We covered around 30,000 miles in the 911 and God knows how many miles on plane, boat and in other cars. It's full of the most amazing memories and I hope the most amazing content. I really, fingers crossed, hope you guys enjoyed everything that we got to do last year. If you missed any of the videos, if this series has kind of reminded you of your favourite moments, please do go back and check them out. All the videos, of course, are still online in the Drive the World playlist. So give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it and make sure you stay subscribed for plenty more videos to come.